Hi everyone, welcome to another webinar from SQL Maestros. Today's topic is T-SQL tips and tricks. My name is Amit Bansal and I will be your host and speaker for the day. I primarily do two things. First, I work with SQL Maestros, and under SQL Maestros, we do a lot of consulting work. Our focus areas are performance tuning, query optimization, troubleshooting, root causes of bottlenecks, diagnosing them and fixing them. And the second thing we do is whatever we learn from our real world projects, we bring them to our learning solutions. And our learning solutions include video courses, master classes, both live as well as the recordings, and webinars like these and free tutorials on our YouTube channel and in the lobby on sqlmaestros.com. So this is what we do. Our daily lives involve a lot of working around SQL Server, and we have been working with SQL Server for more than 20 years now. So before we begin with today's content, first things first, a common question about the webinar recording. So is this webinar going to be recorded? The answer is yes. You can find all our webinars, the recorded ones, on sqlmaestros.com from the same website where you had done the event registration. So sqlmaestros.com is right in front of you, and I will just take a minute to take you through the website. So while you're on the home page, you can find all our key offerings on the top here. Here is a very short introduction about who we are and what we do. Here are some detailed links about our popular services, some recent tutorials, both the free ones as well as the premium tutorials. And as you scroll down, you will have a few latest updates here. So where are the recorded webinars? If you see on the menu link, there is something called as recorded webinars. And if you click on browse recorded webinars, this will bring you to this page where you will be able to see all the recorded webinars. And as far as I remember, at least all the webinars of this year are up on this page. So when you are browsing this page, you will see that some webinars have a price tag to it, but most of them are free. Some webinars have a price tag because we want to keep the show running and there is a cost to everything. So we have attached a very small price tag to them. Now, when you look at so many webinars, you might be wondering that if you subscribe to a webinar recording, there are so many of them. So do you need to go and subscribe to each one of them individually? You might want to do that if you're just looking for a few of them. But if you kind of want all of them, then you can join SQL Maestros as a member. There are two membership levels. If you click on the join link, which is the first link on the website there on the menu bar, it will bring you to the membership page. The free membership is free. You pay nothing at all, and you get access to all our free webinars and free tutorials. If you become a free member, you get access to the free lobby here. If you go to the video lobby, there are two links there, free content and premium content. And what you see right now in front of you is the free content, where you can see all the SQL Server tutorials, all the free webinars, etc., etc. But if you are someone who is keen on advanced content around SQL Server, advanced tutorials, and some of those priced webinars that have a price tag to it, you might want to take up the premium membership. The premium membership is an annual membership which will give you access to our premium lobby. So if I take you to the premium lobby, you will see all the SQL Server advanced tutorials that are part of premium membership, and all the paid webinars are also available here. So the choice is yours. Either you can just subscribe to one or more webinars that you are only interested in, or you might just become a member depending on the kind of content you wish to access. Okay, so do not forget to check out sqlmaestros.com. Apart from the webinars thing, there are a lot of other things out there which you may want to explore. All right, with this, let's jump back to the content on the VM. So today's topic is T-SQL tips and tricks, and I am precisely showing you 5 demos, 5 tips and tricks. So I answered the housekeeping question about the recorded webinars. The second question is about questions and answers. So there is a Q&A panel on Zoom toolbar here. So please use the Q&A panel to ask questions. You ask questions by typing, and I am going to answer your question by typing as I deliver the webinar. So yes, your questions are going to get answered live. You don't have to wait till the end of the webinar. You will see that the moment you punch in your question in next few minutes, you will get the answer. All right, another third question that keeps coming is about the resources. So on the same website, sequelmaestros.com, if you go to the webinar section, you have resources menu link also. That's also available to you, where you will find all the scripts that I use in my webinars and our tutorials. All right, with this, let's get started with T-SQL tips and tricks. So as I mentioned earlier, there are precisely 5 demos that I'm going to show you today, which means 5 tips, 5 tricks, 5 techniques, whatever you want to call them. Now, I will totally appreciate if you know some of these, because chances are that you might know them, which is totally fine. And chances are that you might not know them, and it will be good that you learn. In case you know them, please contribute with your experience. Maybe you may want to give some feedback, some more suggestions in the chat window or in the Q&A panel. So obviously, it is all about your knowledge, skills, and experience if you have come across this scenario and if you have solved them. But the idea really here is that when you talk about T-SQL techniques, there are just so many of them. It is always difficult and very hard to choose the best 5 or the top 5. So what I've done is, based on our experience, I have randomly chosen 5 of them. Let's call this as part 1. And then maybe if this is good, this is successful, and if we get good feedback from you, make sure you give us the feedback at the end of the webinar. So if we get your comments, and good comments, of course, then we might want to do part 2 with maybe another set of 5 techniques. Okay, let's begin. What is the first tip and trick? You need higher precision in life. Okay, so that is just a humorous statement there. We are talking about SQL Server numeric precision. So many times you are doing these numeric calculations where you want higher precision, but sometimes you get restricted because of the SQL Server data type. Okay, let's look at a practical example. We are using AdventureWorks 2016 here. Let's scroll down. So what we want to do is we want to perform some allocation, and we need to be precise. What kind of allocation? Let's talk about this. In AdventureWorks, there are 2 tables. One table is called purchase order header. So 2 tables related to purchase. So the first table is purchase order header. And as the name says, this has 1 record for each order. And this is the order header, which means it will have the details of all the summarized order information like subtotal, order date, customer, ship method, etc. But as you know, each order can have a line item, which means in each order you can have multiple items being placed. That information goes in a table called purchase order detail, and this is a sample record from purchase order detail. So the purchase order header will have purchase order ID, and the purchase order detail will have the purchase order ID and the purchase order detail ID. So what kind of allocation you want to do? Basically, for each item that is there in a purchase order, you want to identify the line item ratio, which means that let's say there are 5 items in a purchase order. So what is the ratio of each item in comparison to the whole order? It's a very simple formula, which is the order quantity into unit price by the subtotal, which will give you line item ratio. And of course, you're trying to find this out, and you have to combine or basically join purchase order header and the purchase order detail table. So let's do this now. So remember, order quantity and unit price, these things are coming from the detail table. Here you have order quantity and the unit price, and the subtotal is coming from the header, and you're computing line item ratio. If I go and execute this query, what you are going to see is the line item ratio being computed, and you will observe that you are limited to 4 decimal places here. Look at the precision. The precision here is 4. So something like 0.2535, etc., 0.3147, etc. Now you want higher precision. Now it totally depends on the business requirement. If your business is satisfied with 4 precisions, 4 decimal places, it's all okay. But if you want higher precision, like in many businesses, there is always a need of higher precision, then you got to solve this problem. So what is the problem? Line item ratio is up to 4 decimal places and we need to do better for accounting. The reason why I use the term accounting here is when you're dealing with a few hundred records and you are rounding off to 4 decimal places, it is all good. But just think about it. If you are dealing with millions and billions of records and you round up to 4 decimal places, and at the end of the day, let's say we sum up all the line item ratio or the computed amount value based on the ratio, then you will actually get a difference of a few $100s. Now, a few cents can be computed for or could be written off, but what about a few $100s? That kind of difference might not be acceptable to the business. So you need to get really closer and you need to be more precise. That's the requirement. But first, let's understand what is the culprit here. Why are you getting 4 decimal places? You're getting the 4 decimal places because of the money data type. Now the money data type is only up to 4 decimal places. Let's go and check the unit price column of the purchase order detail table. Let's do SP help, purchasing purchase order detail. Let's execute this and you will see unit price is money data type. You can clearly see that there. And what are you seeing? The scale here is 4. So that's the scale, that's the precision you are getting. Now this being said, and we have identified the problem and now you know what the need is, what the business need is. Let's look at some solutions. Okay. Now, as I said, many of you already know these solutions, right? But let's look at all of them, and depending on the output, you can decide which one you want to go for. Now, the most common solution that I see, which is great, is multiply by 1.0 or 1.0. If you do this, you will get a much higher precision. So if you look at line item ratio 1, which is the default what we were getting, I've computed another one here called line item ratio 2. And here you can see I'm computing this into 1.0 because unit price is being multiplied here. So let's do this. If you go and execute this, oops, what's wrong? Okay, I didn't select the whole query properly. Let's do that. And you can see line item ratio as these, but look at the line item ratio 2. So you are getting a much higher precision when you multiply by 1.0. Now multiplying by 1.0, I really recommend, and it gives you a real high precision, high scale, and is one of the quickest implementation that you can do. All right. What are the other solutions? You can cast as float, or solution number 2, you can this should be solution number 3. Okay, we're doing 3. Okay, so you have solution number 1, multiply by 1.0, solution number 2 cast as float, and solution number 3 is cast as decimal. Okay, so let's look at float now. So you have line item ratio 1, which is the default that we were getting. Then you have multiply 1 with 1.0, which is line item 2, and look at what we are doing in the third case. So what we are doing is we are using the cast function to cast this as float. Now the moment you do this as float data type, then you will get a higher precision. So now you can see line item ratio 1, this is multiplied by 1, and this is the output of float data type. Okay, this is also good. Or you may also cast as decimal. That is the last one that I do here, which is as decimal. This will also give you equally higher precision. But look at the output of each one of them. There might be minor differences when how these are computed based on the data types. So you have a couple of these solutions at your disposal depending on what suits your business. So this is about SQL Server techniques to get higher numeric precision. All right, questions can continue to come in the Q&A panel. So that was tip, technique, trick number 1, SQL Server higher numeric precision. And I'll quickly summarize. We talked about multiplying by 1.0. We talked about converting or rather casting as float or decimal. Okay. T-SQL technique, tip, trick number 2, using new sequential ID function. Now, let's go back to those, older days where I've seen so much of usage of the unique identifier data type and the new ID function. Primarily, this being used for the purpose of primary key. So when you create a table, and when you do not have your own format for a primary key, like let's say customer ID, CUST001, something like that. If you don't have your own format and you kind of depend on the system to generate a primary key for you, we have seen 2 usages here. One is of course the identity column, and then I have seen a lot of usage of unique identifier data type along with the combination of new ID function. So you know what the new ID function in SQL Server does? It generates a random GUID, globally unique identifier, which is guaranteed to be globally unique. So if it is guaranteed to be globally unique, you can really use this as the primary key. Now there is a problem with using GUID, and of course there are some gotchas with using even identity, right? So there is always a possibility of reseeding identity and manually inserting identity. Those kind of things can happen with identity if you're not careful. So you have identity attribute as a choice, you have this as a choice. The problem with globally unique identifier and the new ID function is fragmentation. Each time when you generate a new GUID using the new ID function, you get a guaranteed unique value, but there is no guarantee that this value is higher or lower than the previous GUID that is being generated. Which means if it is most likely when you have this attribute with the primary key, then by default you have a clustered index on that table, on that attribute. And if every new primary key value which is being generated, if it is not ever increasing in nature, which means the next value could be higher or lower, then there are chances of fragmentation, because depending on the value, it has to go into the right page. Why? Because the attribute data gets sorted because there is a clustered index on it. That leads to fragmentation. Fragmentation leads to more page count. More page count will lead to more IO. More IO will lead to more runtime for the query, which means the total execution time of the query might increase. So there are performance issues with something like this. So you have another option now starting from SQL Server 2005. I know we are way ahead than SQL Server 2005, but for whatever reason, these are things that are still lesser known or not implemented much. But then you have a new function called new sequential ID, and as the name says, new sequential ID, which means every GUID that you get will be higher than the previous one, which means it is ever increasing in nature. And this means that fragmentation will be nil, will be 0, or will be minimal, right? This is what we want to test. So what I'm going to do is, let's create a test, multiple test tables. We are going to create a test table to test the identity column. And then we are going to create a test table. Why are we calling this as identity? Okay, should not be called as identity. We should be calling it as GUID. All right, whatever we are calling it is fine. Let's just focus on test 1, 2, and 3. Okay, why not change this on the fly? Okay, so we are creating 3 tables here. Test 1 is going to use identity. Test 2 is going to use the old one, unique identifier with new ID function, and test 3 is going to use the new function, which is new sequential ID. This table has, okay, this table has just one column, right? Okay, 2 columns. One is for the primary key and another name is test varchar. Let's go ahead and create these tables. Okay. All right, tables created. Now we are going to insert some data into these tables. How many records? I'm going to insert 10,000 records in each table, and that's, there you go. 10,000 records in each table. In the first table we have identity, second table we have the GUID with new ID function, and the third table has new sequential ID function. Let's do that now. Okay, let's go and execute this. This is going to take just a few seconds. While the insert is happening, I'll have a sip of water. Okay, so the inserts are happening. All done. So commands completed successfully. Now we are going to check, okay, fragmentation level. So object ID name is, I didn't know, I changed that. So I'll just put as test. Hopefully this should work. Let's go and check fragmentation for each of these tables. Let's go and execute. And what you're going to see for test 1, fragmentation is just 3%. For test 2, which is the culprit, right? And you should completely avoid using GUID, the new ID, with the new ID function. Fragmentation is 98%. I mean, totally fragmented data. Test 3 is relatively very good, which is just 2%. This is your new sequential ID. And just not the fragmentation. If you look at the page count also, this will give you some sense of what's going on with the storage. So you have 30 pages, you have 64 pages here for test 2, and for test 3 you have 45 pages. So more IO with test 2. So if you really want GUIDs as your primary key, and if that's your design, then and if that's your need and that solves your purpose, then look at new sequential ID instead of new ID. All right, that's the technique, that's the tip, that's the trick for the sequential ID requirement. Okay, let's clean up. Questions? Yes, while I clean up, please punch in your questions in the Q&A panel and I'm going to answer them. Hope you're enjoying the demo. Let's go and drop these tables. All done. Let me save the script so that this can be shared with you. All right, friends, as questions keep coming in, I'm going to answer them. And before we move on to trick 3, tip 3, technique 3, I just want to quickly introduce you to the upcoming live masterclass. Just allow me 1 minute. So if you go back to SQLmaestros.com, you have masterclasses here, and there is something called as upcoming masterclasses. We have just one upcoming masterclass, which is our most popular masterclass, SQL Server Performance Tuning, Internals, Troubleshooting and Performance Tuning. That's the class title. This is a 40 hours program. 40 hours program, and we divide it in 2 weeks. We do it 4 hours each day for 2 consecutive weeks. That makes it 40 hours. Why we do it this way? Simply because you can then balance your job, your work along with learning. So this batch, as of this recording, the next batch is starting in December. You can check the date and time, etc. This masterclass is very comprehensive, very deep dive. You should look at this live class only if you are interested and keen on diving deep into SQL Server internals, troubleshooting and performance tuning. We cover internals only to the extent that it is practically helpful to you solving real world performance challenges. So if you look at the modules, there are 14 modules starting from module 1 to module 14, and we cover everything around architecture, scheduling, weights, CPU performance tuning, TempDB performance tuning, IO tuning, memory troubleshooting, concurrency and transaction, query execution and plan analysis, statistics and index internals, a huge module on query tuning and index tuning, then plan caching, recompilation, extended events, along with monitoring, tracing and baselining, followed by all the new performance features in the latest versions of SQL Server. So this is a masterclass that covers the depth as well as the breadth. Very comprehensive, very rigorous, and very intensive. If you are a fan of live masterclasses, this is the one that you should attend. Apart from attending live, you will get the recordings of the entire masterclass for a lifetime. Yes, I repeat, for a lifetime. So if you are registering or subscribing, you get to attend live and you get the recordings. You can watch those recordings as many times as you want, wherever, and yeah, for your entire life. So take a look at that. The link is there in the chat window. This is upcoming masterclass. It's also there on top here, live masterclass. All right. With this being said, okay, let's go back to the VM. I have talked about the webinar recordings and the masterclass recording. Now let's continue our demos, and we are going to talk about the next technique in T-SQL tip and trick 3. If you want to watch the remainder part of the webinar and all the remaining demos, you can subscribe to the webinar on SQLmaestros.com and get lifetime access to the recorded webinar. All you have to do is just go to SQLmaestros.com, click on the recorded webinar section and get access to all the webinar recordings. There are many of them. Some of these webinars are free and some of them are very nominally priced. So the ones that you're interested in, you can subscribe to them and get lifetime access. Now, because there are so many webinars, subscribing to each webinar might be a bit cumbersome. So we have another option, which is SQL Maestros membership. So the first link on SQL Maestros says join. If you click on that, it will bring you to SQL Maestros membership. Things are very simple. There are two membership levels. The first level is free, where you get access to all the free webinars and all our tutorials and demos, more than 200, 300 demos and tutorials. All you have to do is just become a free member. You're paying nothing and you get access to all of them. So you don't have to go and subscribe to each webinar individually. Just become a free member and then explore the free video lobby. So if you go to the video lobby here, there is something called as free content where you get access to all of that. But then all of us are interested in advanced content, isn't it? And that is where premium membership comes into play. So the webinars that are paid, and there are many advanced tutorials and demos. If you want access to all of them, you can become a premium member and pay a nominal price, which is annual membership. Once you do that, you can explore the premium video lobby. If you go to the premium video lobby from here, or just go to the video lobby and click on premium content, you can see all the paid webinars and all the advanced tutorials and demos and get access to all of them with your annual membership. Anyway, choice is yours. There's a lot of content on SQLmaestros.com, and you can also explore the YouTube membership level as well. So you have free content on YouTube channel, and you can also join and become a member of SQL Maestros on YouTube, where you can pay a monthly fee, get access to all the paid webinars and advanced content. So in summary, you can go to SQLmaestros.com and become a member, or you can become a member on YouTube also. Becoming a member on SQLmaestros.com turns out to be a little cost effective with the annual membership in comparison to YouTube monthly membership. But anyway, choice is yours, whichever platform you wish to use. Happy SQL.